Kia ora koutou, ko Gillian, Wadams, tuku ingoa. So yeah, thanks for having me, and as Peter just said, there's a lot of overlap between what Glenn's just been saying, which is hopefully a good thing. So I think it seems compulsory in conservation to wear a lot of hats, and I know there's many people here doing that. So other hats in my wardrobe are that I've been working at Matuku Link on some fish passage research. I'm the Secretary of the Sanctuaries of New Zealand Committee, formerly Up in the Park Project Manager, now volunteer. And today I'm here with my Encounter Solutions hat on. So we're a small, but I think far-reaching team. Simon, the creator and director, is here in the front row as well. So we're based in Mount Eden and work on projects all through New Zealand, Australia and the Pacific. So I'm going to talk about some technology that is established and in use, also some that is more emerging, and some collaborations and case studies, and that's what I'm going to focus on because I know we've just heard about some smart trapping, so I'm really talking more about the collaborations today. And been asked to leave some room for questions. So the bird in this photo, of course, needs no introduction. Bird of the year, the rock wren or piwauwau, and one of our projects focuses on protecting these guys. So that was a nice link with our current bird of the year. So just a quick overview of the way the Celium, that keeps moving on its own. The way the Celium system works is you have a node, it's about that size, placed on a trap, which talks by radio frequency to what we call the hub, which is where the backhaul happens. So that's either satellite or cellular backhaul to a server, and that's where you, the users, interact with it through logging onto a web portal or getting email notifications. So just a quick overview again. We work with all types of trap. There's different sensor or detection modes, either magnet mode or vibration mode. And as I mentioned, it's either cellular or satellite backhaul, which works for everywhere in New Zealand apart from one project site in inland rural Canterbury. And we've got a Bluetooth interpretation system set up for them. And another type of trap that's shown here is actually a pig corral, which is something that I think could be quite useful here in the Waitakere Ranges. Pig control being an ongoing problem here, and you can monitor these traps with the nodes on the gates so that you can set them to stay open whilst you, as they call it, train the pigs to come in and look for the food, and then lock the gate when you've got a whole herd in there. So you can get a whole mob of pigs in one go, rather than having hunters chasing around in the bush after one or two. So coverage modelling is something that's done through our web portal and allows projects to do some modelling in advance to predict how much hardware, how many masts they're going to need, and where they're going to be able to get coverage to place their traps. So this is a fictitious one I just put up on the Arataki Visitor Centre just up the road from here to see how that would go. So as you can see, that would be a great hub site. All the green or bluey sort of covered areas there are where you could place the trap and have it successfully communicate or ping, as we say, the hub. So from that one mast site, we could actually cover all through Tamaki Makaurau down to the Hauraki Gulf there. And yeah, almost out and meet up with the Tawhiti folk in Franklin. So it's been actually well established by Glenn just now, some of the benefits of a monitored system. And that quote at the top there, "It's all very nice, but what does it all mean?" is what an elderly farmer once said to me. And I just keep it in mind sometimes as to try and make sure that you can always got good examples of explaining this. So we've been hearing that there can be much faster response time to clear kill traps. If you know that something's in the trap, you're much more likely to go out there sooner and check it. If you're potentially a farmer checking fences, you can do a quick diversion off to go to a trap that you know has got something in it. And that means that your network is available a lot more of the time. And the game changer really is that it makes live capture trapping feasible. So as we've just been hearing, you have to go to visit within 12 hours of sunrise for animal welfare reasons. So that becomes very labour intensive. And if you're only having to visit the traps that have told you we've got a capture in them, it hugely increases your efficiency. So a couple of our projects have reported that live capture trapping has been up to 5 times more effective for them, and that's mainly around catching feral cats, but it's also mustelids, possums and hedgehogs. And as more and more long life lures are developed, the need to go to visit the trap regularly gets less and less as those lures last more effectively longer. So there's a number of other applications which I'll talk more about of the Celium network. And a note on collaborations is that it's really important that we're talking to people like everyone in this room who's like-minded with us, but it's also, as we know, important to get people that we don't have in this room already involved, already interested, getting on board with conservation. And collaborations can be a fantastic way to do this. So some of our like-minded collaborations would be Trap NZ, Cacophony, DOC, but some of the more unusual ones are when we get into things like assets, health and safety, wildlife monitoring obviously is in the same vein as conservation. There's often an opportunity for a larger organisation such as a regional council to host a network for a smaller organisation, so that can be a sort of a co-funding collaboration. So one that I particularly wanted to talk about was one we're working towards with drowning prevention Auckland, and water safety would be key to a lot of our hearts living as we do close to the West Coast beaches. So by having our hubs along the West Coast, it's possible to monitor key assets for life-saving, such as the life rings. It would also cover traps put out in that area, and it can monitor gates and water troughs for regional parks or private landowners. And that's what I was getting at with potentially the less like-minded folk, is that a number of farmers, rightfully so, are wary of allowing volunteers or contractors to access their land because of the consequences of having gates left open. But with this system, the gates can be monitored and they can be reassured that they'll be let know if anything's gone wrong with the gate. Same with the water troughs. They can either find out exactly how much water is there, or they can be notified when it drops below a certain level. So one of our collaborations is very local, so it's nice to mention a local one. Ark in the Park. Here we've got nodes on A24s, and that was part of a collaboration with Squawk Squad, which was ultimately wound down in terms of the Squawk Squad side, but the collaboration is still strong with Encounter Solutions and the Ark in the Park team now. So this photo shows one of our nodes on an A24, and one of the really interesting things that we've learned through this is the time of triggers, which is really interesting for animal behaviour, and also the effectiveness of the good nature lures over time. So we've got now 5 years of data, and there's 2 really clear peaks of when something, so we can say most likely a rat, maybe a stoat, visits these traps. There's a clear peak between 9 PM and 10 PM, and then another clear one sort of from 1 to 2 AM. So that's really interesting in terms of when you might time short-term lures into the environment, whether it's from the motor lure, whether it's a sound lure, some other kind of thing. Also the lure effectiveness, I think we probably all know that the A24 lures don't necessarily last the full 6 months that they are supposed to. So we can see a real spike in activity on night 3 after putting the lure out, and then that tapers right off, so that we're only getting 1 or 2 triggers a night over the whole network of 60 traps for the rest of the entire 4 to 6 month time period. So refreshing those good nature lures sooner would be well with it. Working with Auckland Council in a slightly different setting from some of the projects as well, being that they're using it for an incursion alert. So this is a real image of the coverage from the hub. We've got projects working on Rakino and Motukorea, Browns Island, and that's one tool in their toolbox of the incursion alert. I believe mostly they use observations from people reporting seeing them. There's also the detector dogs that our system is there as well now. So another of our projects is at McRae's Flat in Otago. So Grand and Otago skinks were predicted to be extinct within a decade there, and that's the DOC program's been really solid in trapping there. They did a fairly formal trial with the Celium equipment with 1,000 traps, and these are some quite impressive statistics that have been gathered. So the remote monitoring reduced trap checks by 75%, saved over 1,000 person hours, and of course those staff, they're not redundant, they can do many other things to protect our wildlife. And Patrick Liddy, his quote about the Celium is, "Remote monitoring has changed live capture trapping from an effective but expensive tool to our most effective and efficient trapping method for feral cat control." And I think that's really key, and it alludes to the fact that we've known that live capture trapping for cats is really effective for a while, but it's making it feasible to do that is really the key, and being able to roll it out in more areas, larger areas, and for more times of the year. So this is our rock wren, Piwawau link. This is a really cool collaboration with the Aspiring Biodiversity Trust. So walking guides were taking visitors into the rock wren habitat, but because they didn't have time to check all of the traps there, they wouldn't check any of them. So after the Celium system was installed, they knew before leaving their base which traps were triggered, so they'd make a little note of that. So they now regularly check those traps. So we've now got trapping happening for a really vulnerable species that wouldn't have been happening otherwise, just because of the remote location. So that's also a really good learning experience for the clients that are with these guides. So I'll talk a little bit about Australia now as well. So this very cute little guy is a Kangaroo Island dunnart, which might have been what Gillian was showing before, so I'm not sure. So there's 21 species of these dunnart, and they have wonderful names. So one of the species is the hairy-footed, then there's the lesser hairy-footed, there's the red-cheeked, there's all sorts of great names. And they're very vulnerable, as you can see. So Kangaroo Island is an island just south of Adelaide. And the Australian sites tend to be very flat, which is challenging for radio frequency message sending, and very large, so over 17,000 hectares, that's now been expanded to 77,000. And some of the results from this project are that they've had a 70% time reduction in checking traps each day, a 200% reduction in staff required to work on trapping, now involved in other things, and a cost-benefit analysis indicated a 36% decrease in cost over 12 months. So it is an expense to invest in this gear, but it will definitely lead to long-term savings. So this project's actually being written up as a peer-reviewed paper, which will be published. Another Australian project is Arab recovery. So this is a really interesting one where they were doing the live capture cat trapping. Cats were seen on cameras, but we were having the issues of the cats not wanting to actually go into the cages. I know there's the saying, curiosity killed the cat, but they actually seem very wary. So they were going out, checking, and this was driving around, walking around, and having no results. They installed the Celium system and started catching the cats within 2 weeks. And they've attributed that to the lack of human disturbance, because of course previously someone had to go every day and check all of the traps, leaving their scent around, disturbing the area. So with the system, I'm not actually sure what kind of lure they used, if any, but they were able to just keep clear of the area until they had their catches. So I just wanted to mention something that was raised by Matt Maitland, the chair of the Sanctuaries Committee, at the conference in August. And it can be a problem that people aren't always clear what technology is established and working and what is still being trialled or under development. And there's also lots of options out there, and it can be confusing about what is best for what site, what are the considerations that you should be looking at. And something that I think people can overlook is that using a system like Celium or any technology, it's not generally just a decrease in effort, it's changing your effort. So instead of people bashing around in the field, it's people spending more time understanding the system, working on the portal before heading out. So it's working smarter or doing more rather than just doing some of the hard field checking work. So with some of the newer stuff as well, it's really important that we do get feedback from users, and there's always something weird that happens. If we're talking about wild animals, environments either with or without people, and it's really important that people do give us that feedback so that we can respond to it. And as an acknowledgement of some disillusionment that may have been creeping in with some new products that have been out there and taken a little bit to understand and how to use them. So there's a problem of, we're all busy in our projects, people don't always have time allocated to learn a new system and then make sure it's working properly. The risk is that the technology may get not used to its full capacity and people may be wary of other new emerging developments. So Predator Free 2050 are supporting Encounter Solutions to provide best practice information and product comparison as well as training. So it's going to be quite interesting to put together, especially the product comparison thing. There's lots of different remote monitoring systems out there, and it will be actually really interesting to have all in one place, pros and cons, which is right for your site, all the kind of questions that if you were thinking of making an investment in one of these systems, what you'd need to consider. So there'll be an e-learning component of this, and it will cover best practice for remote monitoring in general, so that's regardless of which system you go with, what are the things to consider and how can you do best practice. Then there'll be some Celium specific training and accreditation as well. So these are things that are still being developed. I'll just quickly go through them. Some deeper integration with the AT220. So that's a trap that some people are finding is invested in and then maybe put away in the shed and not used because it does take some time to get to know it. So some deeper integration with that. Some of the thermal imaging we've been hearing about. Some bat detectors, wildlife monitoring type stuff. There's a remote locking of cage trap system being developed, and also RFID for feral cat or any cats. So when it, not that a feral cat actually would be microchipped, but when a cat is microchipped and is caught in a cage trap, the system can tell that. So we can respond appropriately. So the cat that you can see there is actually Cuddles, and Cuddles belongs to Greg, who works with us developing this, and he's been a very willing volunteer to help test the system, and he is microchipped, so a very good volunteer. So this is just an example of why the remote cage locking could be useful. So the cages can be locked remotely by sending a command. So that could be in response to weather, any changing access requirements, health and safety considerations, and also day and night. So could be locked open during the day when non-target native species are more active, and functioning again at night when predators are more active. So the Arthur's Pass project is one of ours that is particularly keen to use this, and that's because they regularly have their traps triggered by snow, and so then have to either get ahead of the snow and go around and close all the cages, or try and get out there to check them, because if they're triggered they have to assume that there could be a live animal in them. So that'll be extremely useful for them. I'm sure their people will appreciate not having to go out in the snow. So thank you. These are some of the many groups we work with. Any questions?